Having seen my daughter off to kindergarten, I made sure that Miranda, as it were, had accepted her fate, that there was no one to sit at home with her. Mommy has to go out to work, help Daddy to earn money, so that then they lived well, did not need anything, and could buy her any toy. Lisa decided to stop by the store on the way. It was a morning ritual, a kind of relaxation, a household routine. She and Mason hadn't bought a new apartment yet, but Lisa enjoyed taking a leisurely stroll through the furniture departments. Already she knew what kind of upholstered furniture they would put in the living room, what color the kitchen would be, what wallpaper they would paste. Miranda, on their room, stopping near the shelves with dishes, noticed suddenly her classmate. After graduating from Teacher Training University, Kelly did not go to work at the school, but opened her own real estate agency, deciding that a teacher should work by vocation, and all she needed was a college degree. Kelly, hi, haven't seen you in a while? Apparently, the classmate's finances were in order. She was standing near a showcase with expensive services and, not paying attention to the price, was figuring out which one was better to buy. Lisa at this time could only gawk and be happy for her classmate. For the third year in a row, she and her husband had been saving every spare penny for an apartment, so that at last their daughter would have her own room and she and Mason would have a bedroom. Oh, Lisa, or hi, it's been a long time indeed. I carefully put the plate back on the shelf. She stood for a moment, looking thoughtfully at the drawing. She looked around and saw that no one was around. She stroked Lisa's shoulder thoughtfully. I know you and your husband are separated. Lisa's eyebrows went up. She opened her mouth to object, but Kelly interrupted her. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. I don't know if you know or not. Your husband bought a one-bedroom apartment from his roommate a week ago. And mind you, he put it in her name. Kelly's words were out of her head. What Lisa was about to hear was about to become a huge scandal. How would Kelly know her husband? Obviously confused, didn't figure it out. They're labeling Mason, accusing him of embezzling from the family. Kelly. That's ridiculous. My husband and I have a good relationship. A great relationship. We're not getting a divorce. Mason's not stupid enough to spend $1,000 on a mistress. And there is no mistress. We still live in a one-room apartment ourselves. We'd like to trade it in for a 3-bedroom. The words sounded unconvincing. Maybe her husband really has a mistress. Lately, their intimate life hadn't been going well. A small child was taking up a lot of time. A one-bedroom apartment that soon won't have room for 3 people to turn around. Mason almost always comes home from work tired, eats and falls on the bed. Literally falls asleep right away. Lisa hesitated, frantically thinking of what to do with this information. Should she go to her husband's company, nail him to the wall, interrogate him, or what? Lisa, I know your husband well. I've seen him many times in photos on your social networks. I can't be wrong. Cornet Mason bought a one-bedroom apartment with an 86-square-foot floor plan. Cindy, acting like 2 Burkova lovebirds and whispering, making eyes at each other. It was idyllic. Lady Sweetly thought that now and their joint nest should be renovated, and he kissed her tenderly and replied that they will start renovation as soon as they vacation in the Maldives. Kelly spoke clearly and convincingly, in a way you couldn't make up. The more she leaked information, the more Lisa had to make an effort not to faint. To try to get to the truth and find some explanation for what she was saying. Lisa, I thought you knew, Kelly said guiltily. I was 100% sure he'd left you, but you didn't throw accusations at him. Try to figure it out. Maybe I really did get something wrong. Or misunderstood. Lisa thought the walls in the store were moving. And then someone she didn't know punched her in the face. Huge rivulets of ichor, putting all the force into that blow so that it hurt and really hurt. A chill ran down her body. Waking up, Lisa grabbed onto Kelly. It was all coming together. She remembered how Mason had lamented last week that he had to leave on Monday for a 10-day business trip. She didn't think much of it, but he did. He's going to the Maldives. That's right. Why would he and his daughter need a vacation? So, it's a normal life. Better to spend a vacation with the benefit of his own body, locked in a one-room apartment. Every day fed with promises to buy more, and in the end, decided that they will do without and made his mistress happy. The scattered thoughts in his head finally lined up and calculated in order. Divorce, property division, alimony. Nothing else had come to mind yet. At that moment, she clearly realized one very important thing. If Mason hoped to leave her with nothing, she wouldn't give him the pleasure of feeding her daughter in the evening. After putting her to bed, Lisa sat down at the computer, just in case. She sat on the websites of law firms, read reviews. She should have gone to work a month ago, but she had to go to daycare for a few days. Miranda got sick, had to accustom her to the garden again. 3 years ago, she and her husband just took a risk and opened their own transportation company. The money is not very big, but it is possible to live. True, the bulk of the profits had to save for an apartment. Mason sent this money to a separate account and tried never to withdraw it. When Lisa heard the door lock rattle, she pretended to be exhausted. "Hi!" The trader threw carelessly. He went straight to the kitchen and started rattling the dishes. Apparently, he was hungry. And the mistress is not to borscht. Why bother? There's a wife for that. But I guessed wrong. Let him make his own dumplings or fry his own eggs. Sorry, I didn't have time to cook anything today. I stumbled across an ad. Imagine people are moving out and selling an apartment in a new building. 6th floor, 90 square meters, 3 bedrooms. The price is okay. I figured our savings should be enough. I picked Miranda up from daycare and ran to look at it. I liked everything. I looked up at my husband and pretended to glow a little. Almost laughed when I saw his dumbfounded face. Tomorrow, we will take Miranda to the garden and look at it again together. I warned them we'd be there early. They'll be waiting. Pushing the laptop aside, I watched my husband's reaction carefully. At that moment, I realized that Kelly's words might be true. By the way, can you tell them how much money we have set aside for the apartment? I already called my mom. She said if we need to add a little extra, she'll help. That was a terrible lie. I had no idea my husband would react so inappropriately. He jumped up and down in his seat, breathing hard and almost choking on his anger. What do you mean we'll go look tomorrow? I don't have time for that tomorrow. I got stuff to do, slammed the fridge shut, took out a skillet, put it on the stove. Mason, can you tell me how much money we have in the account? But I'm sick and tired of hiding out. The kid needs his own room. I don't know why you're so angry. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. I don't count them. They're just lying there. By the way, don't get your hopes up about the apartment anyway. 1 more year of daughters should be patient. He mumbled inarticulately, turned away, showing by his look that the conversation was over. What do you mean you don't think so? And in general, why did my question make you so angry? If you can't give me a specific figure, then we'll go to the office together tomorrow. Like it or not, I'm not giving up on my idea. Standing up from the table, Lisa slammed her laptop shut. As I walked out of the kitchen, I felt my husband's eyes on me. I wanted to turn around, to look into his eyes, to scream that he knew everything and let him go to his Maldives, and preferably not come back. But I decided not to hurry. My lips treacherously quivered. I was about to experience one of the worst nights of my life. First of all, to make sure that I had lived with shit for so many years. And secondly, to make sure that there was really no money in the account. As soon as Lisa came out of the kitchen, a message came in from Kelly. "Lisa, are you as worried as I am?" "You talked to your husband," she looked at the messages, not knowing what to say. On the one hand, nothing is clear yet, but on the other hand, you can't fool the heart. Today was the first time she looked at her husband with different eyes, and realized that she hadn't noticed how Mason had turned into a completely different person. This wasn't her husband, not the one she'd come to love. Threw in a couple leading questions, but he didn't answer them.
"I'll go to work tomorrow, see what I can find out. I have a lawyer I know. He used to work at my firm, but his friend opened a law firm and pulled to himself.
I can send you his coordinates. Very smart and competent lawyer. Red diploma? I got a text from Kelly with Cindy's address. A link to her internet page with a note that you can find a lot of interesting things there. A glimpse of Cindy's photo. Lisa had learned a lot about her husband. Everything was clear and straightforward. Mason does have a mistress. And, judging by the photos, for a long time. Before she could flip through the photos, Mason came out of the kitchen. "Have you eaten yet?" I didn't want to look at him. Maybe you can keep me company, because I'm bored alone." He smiled mysteriously, like he was asking me out on a date. I almost blurted out that I was in the wrong address, but mistook it for ironic. But I decided again not to hurry. I'm not hungry, and don't forget to do the dishes. I'm not a servant, much less you. I've decided to go to work tomorrow. Enough with the chill. Miranda will be fine if she stays at daycare all day tomorrow. Of course, she wasn't going to do that. That was a slip of the tongue. But let Mason worry a little for... Lisa, let's not go from one extreme to the other. Why sacrifice so much? You and I have had this discussion. Until Miranda gets used to the garden, you're not going to work. I understand that you are tired, but I think that for the sake of your daughter's health, you can wait a little longer. A guilty smile appeared on her face. Lightning flashed before her eyes. The conclusion was the most radical before she stuck her nose where it was not supposed to be. It is necessary to cover her tracks. All right, I'll think about it. Let her think she listened to what he said. The best part is when she gets all the facts in front of him. She'll hit him with a sneak attack. That'll make his life take a turn for the worse. And that's when it really becomes clear that they'll never be together again. "Oh, Lisa," Mason said. "You won't be coming back to work for months." Clapped her broken eyelashes at the accountant. Machinistically, she plugged the kettle into the socket. "I'll be gone for a while until lunch, and then I'll go to pick up the baby. Molly, prepare me all the documents for the last month." Without reacting in any way to her surprised face, Lisa took from the table the first paper that came across and began to read it carefully. "Don't you trust me to blush to the tips of my ears?" Molly asked. "What makes you think that?" Threw the sheet on the table and sat down opposite. "Don't I have the right to see how the money flows? I have to get up to speed. I'm primarily interested in Lisa." Mason came into the office, leaning his shoulder on the door jamb. He looked at Lisa as if he wanted to flog her. "Lisa, we need to talk." She grabbed the folder the accountant had placed on the desk. "I'll bring it to you later," she threw as she walked. Her heart was pounding traitorously. It was as if she'd been warned she wouldn't hear anything new. So with our savings account. Lisa deliberately sat in the director's chair. Let him get used to the fact that he's not the only boss. Soon the company will be going down the tubies, and the consequences could be very unexpected. "Lisa, let's talk calmly. I know you'll argue," thoughtfully rub at his chin. "In general, I borrowed money. I told a good acquaintance of mine I told him straight away, but I trust him like I trust myself." There wasn't a muscle in his face. I asked for the full amount just in case. "No, half." I couldn't say no. You must understand that circumstances happen. Today, I help him out. And tomorrow, he'll help us out. Well, I'm sorry I didn't let you know. My brain didn't shut down for a second. Working feverishly at the thought of Mason slowly emptying his accounts to leave him and Miranda with a bare ass made my cheekbones curl. I hear you. Let's make a deal without my consent. You don't withdraw another penny from the account without saying another word. Walked out of the office, Mason followed. What? Are you offended? I promise in 6 months, we'll have a much better apartment than the one you were looking at. She stopped abruptly. Her eyes narrowed, her face contorted, as if the rage she tried desperately to suppress had nevertheless burst out. I've got to go. We'll talk at home. She pulled out her phone, glanced at the time, and walked briskly toward the exit. Stopped only on the street to call Kelly and ask for the lawyer's phone number. Mason rubbed his temples. Had it really blown over? Thank God she'd left. So that she did not guess anything, it is necessary to borrow money from someone, put it on the account, to put the vigilance to sleep, and then think what to do next. All the employees have already left. I couldn't make up my mind to close the office and go home. Cindy had called a few times, but he didn't care for her today. Mason had met her about a year ago. Cindy had come to his office, negotiated a freight contract. A month later, the businesswoman showed up again. High heels, see-through blouse. He didn't realize how it all came together. Every time I came home, I couldn't look her in the eye. I realized that if she found out, it would all be over in an instant. Sometimes, he even reassured himself that nothing would happen if he and Lisa broke up. When he told Cindy that he and his wife were saving up for an apartment, and he himself would never remember, he realized the language of his marriage. It wasn't until Cindy asked him for a loan, Mason, I have a favor to ask of you. The landlady asked me to vacate the apartment within 10 days. I have my own savings. I don't have enough for the apartment I want to buy. She sounded unsure, as if she was struggling. Help me, lend me money? You said yourself that you have money lying around. If you don't trust me, I'll sign the apartment over to you. And then, when we pay you off, we'll sign it over to me again, Malcolm. Seeing the confusion in his eyes, Caprice pouted his lips. If I had known it would be like this, I wouldn't have prepaid for the Maldives. I wanted to surprise you. Sighing heavily, I threw a robe over my naked body. Are you serious? Mason plopped her down on the couch. Cindy ran her finger along his chest, gently kissed the throbbing vein on his neck. I love you. I'd do anything for you. I want to finally take you away from everyone so it's just you and me. And I want us to have our own cozy little nest. She sounded so sincere and heartfelt. She seemed so open and charming. Mason realized he couldn't refuse her. How much are you short? Will you really help me? Of course. At the time, he felt he couldn't do otherwise. And now, burning with shame for his rash act. A lump suddenly formed in his throat. The lump made him feel bitter again at the thought that he might lose his family. A chill ran down his body. He was distracted from his anxious thoughts by the ringing of his cell phone. It was the neighbor in the stairwell. Mason, there are Chinese bags with things near your apartment, and on one of them there is your torn passport. Lisa called the caregiver after listening to her detailed account of what Miranda was happily eating. Now she plays with the children and does not remember her parents. She agreed that she would pick up her daughter today right after her afternoon nap and went to meet her lawyer. The lawyer had scheduled it at a cafe not far from his office. Entering the room, Lisa immediately noticed a lonely, rather interesting man. He was sitting at the table, scrutinizing the menu and drinking coffee. When he saw her, he smiled pleasantly, and as if he was sure that it was the girl he was waiting for, He stood up and invited her to the table. Responding to the back of the chair, he listened attentively to Lisa. If he did not understand something, he clarified, asked leading questions. If they, as you claim, paid for the purchase of the apartment in cash, it will be difficult to prove that he gave her the money. We need witnesses. Taking a sip of frozen coffee, Ethan stiffened his face, set the mug on the table. I managed to see out of the corner of my eye that my husband had withdrawn the money from the account the night before the transaction. Literally, the next day, Cindy bought the condo. Kelly can testify in court that they were together. Lisa tried to hang on to every little detail. You see, Lisa, it's up to the judge. If your husband really wants to leave you pantsless, like you said, he's not going to sit idly by. He'll make up that he withdrew the money with your permission and spent it on the needs of the family. That can't be ruled out either. When he saw that she was upset, she lowered her head and could barely hold back from crying. I put my hand over hers. Don't worry, we'll fight. But I warn you right away, if you say that he withdrew exactly half of the amount, then it turns out that he withdrew his money, your half is still in the account. And the firm, I don't want anything to do with him. I can't see his. He's going to the Maldives the day after tomorrow with his mistress. And he's definitely going to buy foreign currency, and that will hit our budget again. Ethan shook his head thoughtfully. We'll have to file for divorce and seize the jointly acquired property. We'll pull up all the payment documents, and with what's left in the account, we'll try to redeem it, his part of the firm. Anyway, we'll try to convince the judge that this is the only way to punish the defendant. Seeing that Lisa was a little relieved, he continued. It's good that you inherited the apartment. On the square meters, he will definitely not claim. If he has a company, your husband will not be enviable. I don't think he'll be able to get back on track with the money he ends up with. If that doesn't work out, we can give up alimony for a while. While he was talking, Liza was painting a picture of how she would throw that insolent traitor out of the house today, buying big Chinese bags so that all the neighbors could see that Mason was going away for a long time. True, she dreamed of sending him to the Maldives, discreetly tearing out a couple of pages in his passport so that this creep would be brought back at the border. But after talking to a lawyer, she decided that today she would send her husband to his beloved Cindy. Let them enjoy each other. It's Friday. Even if they get their contacts involved, no one will get him a passport by Monday. It's a blessing in disguise for her. It's a pleasure to do something special for them. Hearing his neighbor's words, Mason felt every hair on his chest stand up. His heart suddenly stopped. But just a few seconds later, it rolled back up. Robert, what makes you think those are our bags? Asked cautiously.
I was still hoping the neighbor had made some kind of mistake, I asked Lisa. She said, they're your things, and you'll get them soon. But it's been 3 hours. No sign of you. I'm worried. Maybe someone will take one of your bags.
You'd better hurry up. I can't stay at the door much longer. Dropping the call, Mason, as the guy jumped up from his chair, dialed his wife's phone number. It was ringing, but Lisa didn't answer. Grabbing the car keys from the table, galloped to the exit. There was no room to turn around on the landing. As the elevator doors opened, Robert came out of the apartment. Finally, Mason? Everything's safe and sound. Let's hurry up and clear the floor, because the neighbor is complaining that you're blocking the whole entrance. For 30 minutes, she complained that she couldn't squeeze into the elevator. Still unable to believe his eyes, Mason picked up the torn passport, the page where the border guards usually stamped it. It was written in his handwriting, sprawlingly, for assholes like you. Travel to the Maldives is closed. Set up his nest and breathe fresh air in his mistress's 3-room apartment. Lisa knew everything, but how? For a whole year, she didn't suspect a thing. Since yesterday, it was as if she had been replaced. Mason sank down tiredly on one of the bags, ran his palm through his hair. And what to do? How to explain to his wife that he would return everything? He'd get out of his skin, but he wouldn't leave his family without an apartment. But who would listen to him now? He pulled out the key, tried to put it in the lock, but his hands were shaking. But it didn't work. Mason. Lisa changed the lock after hearing the neighbor's words. Letting out a miserable laugh, he tucked the keys into his pocket, pressed the bell. Lisa did not open. Not until he persistently started knocking. After about 5 minutes, the door swung open. Why knock? Don't you realize you don't live here anymore? She asked calmly, as if nothing had happened between them. Though Mason knew his wife well enough to know how much she was hurting. If he could calm her down, he would do it, of course. But, unfortunately, he realized he was up to his neck in his own shit. Lisa, what's going on? Why are you doing this? I've explained everything to you. I'll have the money tomorrow. Let's go see the apartment you like. If you want it so badly, I'll do anything. While I was trying to figure out who I could grab that kind of money from. Mason tried to stay confident and get into the apartment as quickly as possible to get rid of the nosy neighbor. Lisa grinned crookedly. She stepped aside. Well, come on in. I think we have a lot to talk about. Mason glanced at the neighbor, who raised his fist in a gesture of male solidarity and stepped hesitantly into the apartment. Lisa had arranged with her mother in advance for Miranda to spend the night at her place tonight, without offering to let him pass. She stood in front of him, arms folded defiantly across her chest. At first, she planned to yell at him to leave and never come back. But when I saw my neighbor in the hallway, I decided to hear Mason's side of the story. I hope you realize you don't live here anymore, or you still haven't figured out that I'm done. Yes? Check it out? She opened the Cindy page, started flipping through the photos. And Mason's face was covered everywhere with files. But it wasn't hard to guess that it was him. The last picture posted 2 vouchers to the Maldives, Mason's first and last name carelessly retouched. But the year of birth and number Cindy had left. Can you go? I've approved your trip. I hope you enjoyed my parting gift. Lisa grinned crookedly again. What a good girl Kelly was. She'd opened her eyes to the man who'd long ago fallen out of love with her, but who apparently hadn't decided to leave. Lisa, I'm sorry. I didn't lie to you. I did borrow money. Cindy promised to pay me back quickly. I swear, I'm telling you the truth. Shoving his hands in his pockets, Mason leaned his back against the door as if he wasn't going anywhere. If you don't think you're going to keep screwing me and my daughter over, I'm telling you, you're not going to make it. I'm going back to work on Monday. The jointly acquired property has been seized, Lisa said in an indifferent voice. Her eyes were so empty that Mason was confused. Did you file for divorce? Of course I did. How'd you want it? So you can go back to your Cindy and show her your passport and tell her that she's going on vacation alone. I hope she meets a nice man there, and I wish you to be kicked out of your apartment when she arrives. Lisa pushed him away and opened the door. But Mason wouldn't budge. Leave without making me yell at the whole entryway that I'm being murdered. I don't know why you were clinging to our little apartment when you have your own comfortable nest. Push him out to the hallway. I slammed the door shut, rolled back against the wall, dropped my head to my knees, and cried quietly. Lisa slammed the door shut, and Mason was still standing there, looking at the bags that really did litter the entire landing and didn't know what to do. Bags everywhere to Cindy he wasn't going to. Still, he hoped that Lisa would step back in a couple of days and listen to him. By that time, he would try to get the necessary sum from someone he knew, put it into his savings account, and then, to make his wife believe him, transfer the whole sum into her name. He saw no other way to beg for forgiveness. Sighing heavily, Mason rubbed his temples, pulled his cell phone out of his pocket, ordered movers, unloaded all his stuff at the farm, got in the car, and drove to Cindy's place. I didn't warn her. I was terribly angry. No one's stopping her from putting her life on display. But why set him up? Now he's in a lot of trouble because of her. He asked her not to publicize their relationship, but it seems that his request meant nothing to her. Hello, Mason said softly, raising his eyebrows in surprise. The door was opened by a teenager of about 15, appraising, examining Mason from head to toe. I didn't try to hide my curiosity. A lump in her throat, Mason said hoarsely, assuming she had visitors. Mom, it's for you. Strange. Cindy never said she had a son. Stuttered once that she was married, but then split up with her husband after a couple years. Been living alone ever since. Oh, Mason, why didn't you tell me? She smiled affectionately, looked at the boy, and ran her hand through his hair. Mason walked into the apartment, extended his hand to the teenager, but he defiantly hummed, turned away, and went to his room. Ignoring him, Cindy waved her hand, giving her son a glance. Ya never told me you had such a big son. How old will he be? Versus Shaheda soon. 15. Shrugging her shoulders, she added, You never asked. When my husband and I separated, Benjamin stayed with his father. When Mason's eyebrows furrowed, she didn't look embarrassed, but continued, My mother-in-law wouldn't give him to me. She asked me tearfully to keep Benjamin with her. I thought about it and decided that it would really be better for my son that I could give it to him at that time. Now that I've finally bought a house, I've decided to take the child to the city. She said the last words as proudly as if she'd put a medal on her chest for Best Mother of the Year. How old were you when you had him? Mason had never been interested in Cindy's age. He could look at the paperwork she'd filled out, but he didn't feel like it. She looked great. About that, she has a son. She never told me. I had Benjamin when I was 17. Cindy smiled, gave Mason an affectionate peck on the cheek. She couldn't resist a poke on the nose. Benjamin, we won't be disturbed. His father's coming tomorrow. While you and I will be on vacation in the Maldives, my ex-husband will live here with him. William's got the best hands. I've already made a list. What does he have to do? There's a lot of work to do in the apartment. Outlets, faucets. Cindy rolled her eyes and started curling her fingers on her hands. Here. Mason opened his purse and took out a torn passport. Nothing would work out with the trip. Even try as she might, she somehow found out about the money I lent you. She got on your social media. I stared into her surprised face, packed my things, and kicked me out of the house. I exhaled. I sympathize, but I can't help you. If Benjamin hadn't arrived today, I would have been happy to keep you. Oh, but you must realize that's not possible. Now, he twirled the torn passport in his hands, read the note that Lisa had left as a memento, shook his head, and grinned crookedly. To keep the money, you must urgently look for another person. Disregarding the disgruntled, Mason is on a roll. Picked up her phone, went to contacts, ran a quick skim through everything, stopped at the ex's entry. William, do you have a passport? Oh, it's not expired, is it? Oh, great. Bring it with you and throw some shorts and a couple t-shirts in your suitcase. You and I are leaving for the Maldives on Monday. I'd let you in the apartment, but William's bringing his ex-mother-in-law tomorrow morning. Somebody's got to look after their son. It's dangerous to leave a teenager alone at that age. It's better for everyone if you stay with your parents. His hand flicked upward. Mason barely restrained himself from grabbing it by the scruff of the neck. Just a week ago, Angelic Voice thought that she was trying for his sake, and now she says something completely different. When you asked to borrow money, talked to me differently, sang about our cozy nest, and I, like a naive fool, fell for it. And now it turns out I've got nowhere to go. No, he wasn't going to stay at Cindy's. But the way she'd behaved made Mason angry. Look how she talked. I don't know what's wrong. I never meddled in your family, never tried to break it up. I've been cool with the little flings you've given me on occasion. I asked you for help once. Did you say yes? I've regretted it 10 times. What's that got to do with me? You shouldn't have said yes. The apartment is mine, and you're nothing. And don't yell at me. I'm not deaf. You keep acting like that. You're not going to get anything. Mason looked at Cindy and realized he was in real trouble. Not only was he involved with a woman who was 5 years older than him, had a grown son, and was in constant contact with his ex. On top of that, she screwed him over like a total asshole. And now, being in her apartment, he wanted to go to the bathroom, stand under a hot shower, and with the help of a washcloth, get rid of disgust and squeamishness to himself. Thinking about it, Mason grinned, rose from his chair, and walked determinedly toward Cindy. You're not going anywhere. You're going to turn in your travel vouchers, take out a loan, and pay me back the full amount. Cindy took a couple of steps backward and looked up and grinned wryly. Mason, you're in no position to dictate terms. If you act like that, you won't get anything at all. I didn't give you a receipt. We'll see about that. He who laughs last will laugh well, he replied angrily, shaking his head reproachfully. Turning around, Mason took a quick step toward the exit, and when he opened the door, he almost collided with Benjamin's forehead. Grinning contemptuously, he pushed him aside. He realized it wasn't the kid's fault, but he couldn't help it. Shoes, boots. Kicked the travel bag standing in the hallway and, slamming to the front door with all his might, ran out into the entryway, leaving behind the door all this dirt, which he had fed on for the past year, and in which he had managed to rescue the nearest and dearest people. Mason didn't notice how he found himself outside his car, and opening the door, he got behind the wheel. He looked up. Cindy stood on the balcony and looked at him, as if he despised him with all his soul. He despised himself and probably even hated himself. What would happen to his life next? He had a rough idea. He was most afraid for his parents. His father has a heart condition. His blood pressure is always skyrocketing. He wouldn't survive if the truth came out. Of course, now he could climb to his friend, cry, ask for advice. But the man had warned him long ago that a connection with Cindy wouldn't lead to anything good. Listening to his friend, Mason had only chuckled, reassured, and asserted that everything would be fine. As long as Lisa was on maternity leave, he wouldn't have to worry, and then he would think of something. So he did. Now he has to turn inside out, wiggle around like a hot frying pan to get his wife to turn a blind eye to his adventures and forgive him. Under the gaze of his former mistress, Mason opened the window, spat defiantly, started the car, drove out of the parking lot, and headed for a place he'd never be kicked out of. Mason, what happened? Dad was already asleep, and Mom, hearing the lock rattle on the front door, jumped up and came rushing into the hallway in her nightgown. Mom, don't worry, he's going to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. Today, I have no strength. Seeing her upset face, sighed and started rubbing his temples. But Lisa and I had a fight. He spread his hands apart. Unfortunately, not everything is smooth sailing in our family. I'll tell you a secret. We are living people with our own cockroaches. We fight sometimes. So don't ask me anything right now. We'll talk a little later tomorrow. When he took a shower, put on his father's clean pajamas, and collapsing on the corner kitchen sofa, drank tea and watched the evening news. My father came in, and I thought, who is this mother talking to? He sat down next to me and poured tea. I was always happy when my son came, but today for some reason my heart felt traitorously gloomy and told me that nothing good should be expected. Tell me, son, what happened there? Why doesn't he sleep at home? Put the mug aside. Mason got up from the table. I'm going to bed. Mom, thanks for feeding me. It was delicious. Dad, I already told Mom that Lisa and I had a little fight. If you don't want to be blamed, I suggest you stay out of our lives. We'll work it out. Oh, it's a deal. I waited for Dad to nod his head in agreement, and then I went to my room. Mason was at work all weekend, and Monday morning he got a surprise. At 0900, looking in the accounting department, he saw Lisa. Occupying a vacant desk, his wife was naked with folders of documents. Hi? Decided to come to work after all. A chill ran down his spine, but Mason pretended to be very happy to see his wife, silently and qualitatively in his head, and added his greeting. Lisa looked interestedly at the golden bills for loading and unloading. Go to work! In about 20 minutes, I'll come by to see you. We'll have to decide how we're going to work together. Molly, I've already warned. Lisa looked at the accountant's mouth, open in surprise that from now on, any document without exception must have 2 signatures, yours and mine. Okay, I'll meet you in the office, Mason replied. The condemnation in Lisa's voice seemed to come from every direction. She didn't ask him, she didn't consult him. She just put him on the spot. She spoke in a perfect tone of voice, as if she had taken charge long ago and didn't need his consent at all. Mason sat in his office, waiting for Lisa, but she did not come. He went out literally for 5 minutes, and then only when necessary. 10 minutes before the lunch break, he couldn't stand it and went into the accounting office. Lisa was on the phone. Are you going to lunch? They really needed to talk to placate her somehow. He sent the storekeeper to buy flowers, put them in a vase, but Lisa was in no hurry to make peace. We'll talk later. I don't have time. Now, carelessly tossed a bookmark into a folder, warned Molly not to touch anything on her desk, and left the office. Clenching his fists in anger, Mason watched out the window as his wife walked briskly to the black car parked outside her office, opened the passenger door, and sat in the front seat. For about 3 minutes about something. Or was Mason already getting ready to step outside? Grabbed his purse, but the car backed up, turned around, and drove off in an unknown direction. Lisa called the lawyer herself, suggested they have lunch together. There was no energy to hold on to the information I'd inadvertently discovered. I pulled up some documents from the past year. My dear husband, who is a fiancé, is not used to being petty. Cindy had used our firm's services 18 times in 1 year, 4 of which were unpaid. I hope you can guess what she used to pay Mason. I'm going to make him pay for this. That asshole. I don't think he's going to be in charge much longer. He's a fucking benefactor. He's willing to help everyone but his own family. I could hardly resist throwing the unpaid receipts in his face. Lisa shook her head, nervously grinned. Don't tell him that. Forewarned is forearmed, Ethan said quietly. I have information for you too. I picked up his printout at the bank this morning. Did your husband give you jewelry this year? No, of course not. We'll buy a bouquet of flowers for March 8th, a bouquet for my birthday, and a food processor for New Year's Eve. That's all the gifts. Anticipating that her husband had distinguished himself again. Lisa looked expectantly at Ethan. Please, don't be long. Ethan seemed to be waiting for the green light. He spoke quickly. Over the past year, 3 major items were purchased at the jewelry store. March 7, December 30th, and on the eve of Cindy's birthday, on September 9, judging by the stingy amounts. It's hard to call your husband? Ethan pulled out his phone, apologized, answered incoming messages while he was busy. Lisa looked at the printout and could barely contain herself. Not to dial her husband and tell him everything she was thinking. In 3 weeks, the first court hearing. We're lucky the judge is a woman who recently divorced her husband for adultery. And if we give her all the facts, she'll definitely side with us. There's an excellent chance of making your husband accountable for his actions, and I'll earn another check mark when I see Mason's inbox. Lisa grinned and put her index finger to her lips, asking Ethan to shut up, but She moved closer to him so he could hear the whole conversation. "What did you want?" coldly asked. "Lisa, we're in grief. My father was taken to the hospital in serious condition. He called your mom. After the conversation, he felt bad. So I'm on my way to the hospital now. I'd like you to come with me too." There was silence on the phone. Biting her lip, Lisa stared at Ethan for a while, hoping he would help her out. She should have warned her mom not to say anything with the language. But then again, as they say, you don't fight when you fight. "Mason, I sympathize with you, but I'm not going to the hospital. I don't see the point. I think you should have the woman you love by your side. Call Cindy. She'll support you." "What?" Ethan squinted his head approvingly, looked at Lisa thoughtfully, but didn't say anything. "Lisa, please come with me to the hospital. I need your support." "This is not the time to be figuring things out. I don't know what your mom told your father. Shut your mouth." I interrupted him. "What does my mom have to do with this?" I'm sure she didn't say anything unnecessary, figuring if he said one hurtful word to his mom, he'd regret it. "I was hoping you loved me." When a woman really loves, she will never leave her husband in a difficult moment. "Well, God help you if you think you can come and support me and my mom. We're at the 14th hospital." Mason dropped the call, and Lisa was still staring at the faded screen and marveling at his insolence. Seeing her confusion, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. The father-in-law is certainly not to blame for anything. He may be a good man, but there's nothing for you to do in the hospital. Let Mason now be comforted by those for whom he was ready to strip off his last pants. They stared at each other in silence for a few seconds. There was a pause in the air again, giving each a chance to think and make the right decision. "You're right. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't my family anymore. I'm not going to fill my head with other people's problems. I got enough of my own. Mason's given me so much to deal with. What's there to deal with?" Ethan paid for his lunch, which was left almost untouched. When they got outside, Lisa opened the door and dropped into the front seat. In complete silence, they drove to the office. Trying to fight the urge to ask Ethan to turn around and take her to the hospital, Lisa still managed to restrain herself from going against her convictions. "As soon as there's news, I'll call you," Ethan said and hopped out of the car. Seeing his mother's crying eyes and hearing Vanya's convulsive sobs coming out of her chest, Mason felt like a snotty schoolboy who was always afraid to upset his parents with his behavior. He always wanted his mom and dad to be proud of him. He tried to study hard and participate in all school events. For the first time in his life, he was ashamed to look his mother in the eyes, because he understood perfectly well that it was his fault that they were here. And if, God forbid, something happened to his father, he would not forgive himself. His mother looked at him with undisguised resentment. Her pale gray face seemed unnatural. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She wiped them now and then with a handkerchief and shook her head reproachfully. "What did the doctor say?" Mom averted her eyes, looked somewhere away with her nose. Helpless sobs again, say nothing. "We have to wait." Son, what have you done? Your father will never forgive you for this." There was resentment in her voice. She didn't ask anything. She held a small icon in her hands and put it to her lips every now and then. Mason sat down beside her, his head down. What could he say to her now that he, believing in himself, had plunged into his own shit, which he would not be able to wash off for several years? That he had hurt the people closest and dearest to his heart? That he was selfish, thought only of himself, and couldn't even dream of how his affair with Cindy would end? The door opened. Mom rose slowly, holding the icon to her chest. Seeing the upset, the doctor's face stopped. "I am very sorry, but it was not possible to save your husband." Supporting Mom so she wouldn't faint, Mason still couldn't figure out what was really going on. And then, as if on automatic, they sank back into the hard chairs, looked at the doctor, who was still saying something, but heard nothing. The dreadful words sounded in their heads like a drum beat. They were embedded in his inflamed brain and seemed to sound there forever, constantly reminding him of what a terrible and bad man he was. Lisa entered the courtroom with Ethan and immediately saw the distraught face of her former mother-in-law. She got up, came closer, as if she hadn't seen her sister-in-law in a long time and was trying to find changes in her face. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry Noah left us so soon. I was hoping you would come to say goodbye to Noah. He loved you very much." I came, put the flowers down, and left. I said it quietly, like I was apologizing. Still impressed by the unexpected encounter, Lisa went to her seat. Mason sat across from her, whispering everything with his attorney, but keeping a close eye on their meeting. The meeting went quietly until the witnesses began to be called. Kelly entered the room, confirmed that Mason had paid the full amount for the apartment, answered questions in detail. Then came Ethan. When he said the amount the defendant had spent on jewelry, Mason covered his face with his hands in shame. Then Ethan put on the table copies of unpaid freight receipts, a couple of receipts for plumbing fixtures that no one had seen at the office. And Lisa persuaded Lisa to come to the court hearing and act as a witness for the accountant. Molly didn't agree at first, but just a couple days before the hearing, she decided to side with Lisa. She told her how she had performed Mason's errands flawlessly, but had not destroyed the receipts. She kept them just in case, so that she wouldn't be sued by management. Mason was shocked. He sat as red as a cancer. He looked worriedly at his mother, who, having given up her performance, was pulling out of her bag the second Valadol tablet. Before adjourning, Ethan asked for the floor. "Your Honor, in connection with the fact that Mason spent huge sums on a mistress while his wife was on maternity leave, raising a child, saving every penny in order to improve living conditions." He handed the judge a sheet on which all the sums were written out. The plaintiff, unlike Mason, had a fairly decent amount left on the account. Add to it what her husband had stolen from her. And since Lisa doesn't want to work with Mason, because she can't trust him anymore, and without trust, as you can see, there can be no joint business. Lisa is willing to waive alimony for 3 years and to buy out Mason's share of the joint business with the amount of money she has at the moment. A murmur went through the room, but Ethan continued. "Your Honor, due to the above and the circumstances, we ask that no time be allowed for the couple to reconcile." Pulling a fake smile on her face, Lisa looked at Mason. She had been quiet at work for a long time, trying to communicate with him as if she knew nothing about his machinations. It had been hard at first, always wanting to say something hurtful to him, but then she got used to it. Of course, it was possible to oblige him to repay the debt. But she wanted Mason to suffer, worry. She understood perfectly well that her husband would hold on to the source of his income with his teeth. Several times the fishing rod was cast to make an arrangement, but Mason only smiled, hoping that they would continue their cooperation. "I object, Your Honor. I ask that you give my wife enough time to reconcile. I disagree. For the sake of our child, we must try to keep this family together. I admit my mistakes, and I want to make amends." Jump out of my seat. Mason screamed like Argot, followed by an attorney famous for dragging out any case indefinitely. "Defendant, calm down. Take your seat. The court will retire to the deliberation room for a decision." Mason sat in his seat. Counsel, gesturing with his hands, whispered in his ear. He urged him to remain calm. Mason shook his head in agreement. The impression was that he was afraid to raise his head and look people in the eye. I breathed a sigh of relief only when he heard the judge's decision to give them another month to reconcile. "Don't be upset. It was to be expected." Ethan whispered quietly, trying to cheer Lisa up with a pat on the shoulder. In a month's time, he wouldn't be able to turn away. And maybe something else in the meantime. Dig. What a nightmare. Can't you see that there will be no reconciliation? Lisa looked angrily at Mason's satisfied face. The lawyer looked at them with the look of a victorious warrior and with his whole appearance, indicating that everything was going according to a prearranged plan. Look at him, rejoicing as if Cindy had paid him back, and he was ready to fight me for his share. Now, doesn't he realize that nothing will change this month? Lisa sighed with Ethan, heading for the exit. She turned around, meeting her former mother-in-law's gaze. She grabbed Ethan's elbow and quickened her stride. If she wanted to crush Mason and trample on his firm by any means necessary, she didn't want to upset her mother-in-law. She had been so hurt by her favorite son. Although she understood perfectly well that she would always be on Mother's side. After the court hearing, Lisa had no intention of returning to work. She knew Mason would want to talk to her, maybe try to make some kind of excuse. But Molly called and asked her to come right away because she wouldn't let any document go through without her signature. No sooner had she entered the accounting department than Mason appeared in the office about 5 minutes later. Asking Molly to take a little walk, sat down at her desk. "What do you need?" she asked, not hiding her contempt. "Do you know what I want from you? I have no idea. If you think that in a month, which we were given to reconcile, you can fix something, then you are very wrong. I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to do something else for you. So get ready. It's just beginning." Lisa got up from her desk, not intending to be alone with him any longer. She decided to leave the office. "Lisa, wait." She turned around, raising one eyebrow. Waiting grinned crookedly, looking at his sour face. "You realize I won't sell you my share. You'll have to kill me to get it. There's no other way." "You don't want to give in either, I see. So we're going to have to learn to understand each other. I'll find the money to pay off my debt. We'll see about that." "If that's all you've got, then consider me heard you," snapped Lisa. "Well, I'm sorry. I'm confused. It's my fault. I regret confusing things with that, Cindy. Give me a chance to get it all back. For our daughter's sake, think carefully about what I'm saying." Hearing the childish babbling again, Lisa could only take a hint. There were no words. What was there to talk about with a man who only remembered his wife when he was pinned down? "I see you're getting bolder. Did the mistress return the favor so quickly?" With a loud clap, Mason scratched at the back of his heat. "No, she didn't. But I'm sure she will. So much for her love. She could have sold the old apartment and paid you back." Lisa sneered. "I couldn't keep my mouth shut." A couple of days ago, Ethan broke the news. It turned out that Cindy was a very wealthy woman who had moved into a new apartment. She'd rented out the old one and put in tenants. "Lisa, what are you talking about?" Cindy was renting a one-bedroom apartment. Mason's eyes flickered as if she feared a look of mockery, contempt, or something akin to mockery. "My God, why haven't I ever noticed anything like that about you before?" "Mason, your mistress was living in her apartment. If you didn't know that, then again, you've been scammed." Seeing him, pale neck, face shook her head. I wanted to voice the thought that he was unlikely to wait for the money not to give it back. Cindy will think of something, and he, before spreading out before a woman peacock and tail. It is necessary to include brains. But seeing his condition, she decided not to escalate it. Mason was silent for a few minutes, looking at Lisa, still hoping that she would laugh and say she was joking. But without waiting, he opened the door and walked out of the office. It wasn't easy, but Mason tried to stay calm, started the car, and headed for the house he'd been avoiding for some time now. He knew that Cindy had already arrived from vacation, but he didn't call her. He didn't want to, and she didn't want to. The unexpectedly started romance quickly gained momentum, beginning with a passion that passed as quickly as it appeared. That's right. Serves him right. Now he would know how skillfully people could breed people like him. With his head tilted back, Mason laughed nervously. It was time to pay a visit to the woman who had laughed at him. And it was not in his nature to forgive such a thing. As he approached the entrance, he stopped and carefully read the notice,
where it was printed in black and white that the hot water supply would be connected to consumers tomorrow at 10:05, so that no one would. Took out of his pocket the keys he still had. He went up to the 5th floor, pressed the bell.
Benjamin answered the door. When he saw Mason, he kept his face straight. It was like a sworn enemy had come to visit, and nothing good could come of it.
"What's the matter?" he said through gritted teeth.
"Call your mother."
Mason wasn't going to answer to an ill-mannered young man. He understood perfectly well that Benjamin was probing for weaknesses to draw him into a dispute and make him play by his rules. "Mom, it's for you," shouted loudly. "I'm not going to let him in the apartment." "Son, go to your room." "We need to talk to Uncle Mason," Cindy said affectionately, letting Mason into the apartment. Mason continued to remain calm. The man stepped over the threshold. "Why are you here?" Cindy grumbled unhappily, not even trying to pretend she missed him. Her voice had sounded different just a month ago. Cindy had rushed to his neck, whispering affectionately that she missed him. She was offended that he rarely came and almost tearfully let him go home. "I waited for your call. I hoped that as soon as you returned from vacation, you would call." Developing said calmly and surprised himself at his extraordinary wit. He went to the kitchen, closed the door so that the presence of extra ears would not interfere with their confidential conversation. "A normal man wouldn't have let me go anywhere. I did exactly what your Janechka did. Ripped up my passport, compensated the cost of the trip, and forced me to spend the vacation next to him." "What did you do?" "Huh," Cindy waved her hand as if she had been wronged. But she needed no consolation. "Your behavior showed me once again that you didn't care about me. If your wife hadn't found out, would you have sat on 2 chairs all your life?" I shook my head. Cindy walked to the window, leaning against the sill. "You knew I was married, and you were fine with it. After you bought the apartment, it was as if you'd been replaced. You had a son, an ex-husband. It turned out you owned the apartment you were supposedly renting. I don't understand why you had to lie, pretend to be a poor lamb with nowhere to live. I wanted to tell you about it. In the Maldives, I thought that after your vacation, you'd leave your Lisa and come to me. But you blew it. You came home upset and started demanding your money back. What a grief. My wife found out. Did you think you'd spend the rest of your life on the bench?" Cindy turned away, opened the window, and not hearing any words in Mason's defense, continued, "William and I have decided that for Benjamin's sake, we will be together again. He's gone to the village today, but only to quit his job. Immerse. He's going to help his mother dig potatoes, and then he'll be back." Cindy spoke so calmly about it, as if it were no big deal. So she switched men, as if she was hinting at the fact that happiness and success in this life go to those who are able to maximize the use of their natural talents. "Well, if you're doing well, maybe you can sell your studio and pay me back. I'm not a millionaire. I can't give you such an expensive wedding present. Unlike you, I'm in a bad place. I can't change anything. My wife filed for divorce. She wants to take the firm away from me. There's a second trial in a month. I can't even imagine what she and her lawyer are going to come up with. I know you don't want to do it, but I'll have to. And I'll give you all my savings. I'm already broke and in debt up to my eyeballs." His speech was interrupted by a chuckle from Cindy. And a moment later, she was frankly holding over his words and could not stop. It seemed, "Mason, if you decided to confess, I don't absolve sins. I'm not interested in your problems. And don't remind me about my 1 bedroom. If I wanted to sell it, I wouldn't be asking you for money. Let's make a deal. If I get some money, I'll pay you back right away. But I warn you, you can't count on me for the next 10 years. I don't have any money. How many times do I have to tell you?" Actually, having come to the former mistress, Mason approximately on such reception and counted on that Cindy would not return the debt. He'd realized it the day he'd arrived at her place with a torn passport. He tried to reassure himself, but an inner voice kept pressing on his brain and telling him to forget about that sum forever. Smiling, Mason got up from the chair, trying to act calmly, walked to the entrance. Well, if people don't understand, the good way will have to show them how it will be the bad way. If tomorrow everything went the way he planned, Cindy would regret moving into this apartment by tonight. The next day, Mason arrived at work earlier than usual, changed into a work uniform he had picked up at the warehouse. At tenure, he warned Lisa not to lose him. I got in his car and left. Drove to his acquaintance's car service station and left his car, asking him to replace the drive on the right wheel. Took his car and drove to Cindy's house. Took a suitcase of keys out of the trunk for diversion. Just in case, I put a baseball cap over my eyes. Although yesterday, he had paid special attention to the fact that they hadn't put cameras on the intercoms yet and dialed the number of the apartment. But as Mason suspected, no one answered. Cindy's always at work at this time. Son's at school. Ex-husband hadn't moved out yet. And Mason pulled out his keys, opened the apartment. That chicken was smart enough to cheat him. But apparently, counting on his decency, she didn't have the money for new locks. He went into the bathroom, turned on the hot water, plugged the drain. Rusty water ran from the faucet as if paint had been accidentally thrown down the pipe. I did the same with the faucet in the kitchen. I took the suitcase, closed the door, went down to the first floor and walked confidently to the car. I was most afraid of meeting someone in the entrance, but my fears were in vain. Everything went smoothly. None of the neighbors met. How Cindy would pay for the damaged repairs with the neighbors downstairs. Mason did not care. They'd become enemies. And if Cindy was forced to pay for the damage, Mason would be happy for her. Lisa walked into her husband's office, walked to his desk proudly, and looked at him in the back as if she were preparing for another scandal. Who gave you permission to fire Molly? She sat there as if she didn't see Molly in the order, but her last name. In case you've forgotten, I'm the principal of the firm. You must have forgotten that I'm a co-founder, and we have equal rights. Don't you dare go behind my back. Molly is staying on, and this matter is no longer up for discussion. As I recall, you've never interfered with hiring and firing. I've always handled staffing on my own. Be kind and continue to try not to interfere in matters in which you could not do a damn thing. Only in a tone that does not tolerate objections, said the husband. That was until I found out about your machinations behind my back. Now everything has changed. You yourself agreed that all documents must now bear my signature. If you must know, I trust Molly more than I trust you. It's easier for me to say goodbye to you than to fire a competent and honest professional, huh? I wasn't even going to back down. All I needed to do was go through a lot of paperwork. I realized Molly was a pleasure to work with, a man in his place, and she has no intention of losing such a specialist. Oh, that's how you get revenge? You keep sleeping and you see yourself waking up one morning and becoming a full-fledged mistress of the firm. Oh well, honey, I'm going to disappoint you. Mason got up from his chair with his hands in his pockets. He came closer, looked into her eyes, as if seeing her for the first time. He didn't feel like arguing at all. To even forgive him, he was ready to make any concessions. But the lawyer came up with such a move to show his wife that he too can bite, and if necessary, he can kick so that the offender will be sorry. Remember that, and you're not going to get away with it. Be smart, otherwise you'll have to sell me your half. I warn you, the price will be significantly underestimated. He continued his prepared speech. It was easy to guess that he was bluffing, and to hurt her ego, he decided to start with Molly. Seeing her confusion, Mason approached the chair again under her gaze. Mason made himself comfortable in it. You may go to your workplace. When I made this decision, I was thinking of you first and foremost. Now that you're out of maternity leave, I don't see the need to keep another accountant at the firm. I hope you can handle the calculations yourself, which you check 100 times even after Molly. You'll have your own office and no one will get in the way. He crossed his arms and looked at Lisa with all the severity he was capable of. Covered his face with his hands, trying to brush away the tension. It wasn't at all Ozzy fighting with his own wife. His nerves were almost on edge. Ideally, he'd like to work together with Lisa, but she's on the subject. A shill in her own head. What? Impossible. And she wasn't even going to consider that option. Molly will stay on if we can work things out peacefully and not bring our relationship into the public eye. You have 3 options. Either you tell me about your half, or we work together, or we sell the firm to a third party and split the money in half. He leaned over the papers, showing that the conversation was over. For a moment, it seemed to Lisa that Mason was not going to sell his half to her on principle. To anyone but her. Do you have a buyer? She still hoped he was just bluffing. I do. And if we can't come to an agreement, in the kind of environment you're creating with your behavior, we can't work together. With a heavy sigh, Molly has only 2 weeks. Think carefully before you make a final decision. I'm willing to give you 10% for your debts. You'll have controlling interest, but we'll work together. Lisa turned around. I had to think about it? Consult Ethan. There seemed to be silence in the office. What could be heard? The beating of hearts? No, she wasn't going to make any hasty decisions. Let her think she was thinking. Before she could grab the doorknob, the door swung open and Lisa almost collided with her husband's mistress. Like an enraged tigress, Cindy, without noticing anyone on her way, literally flew into the office and in a second stood next to Mason. Dreaming of tearing him to pieces. It was you? You're the bastard who set me up and turned on the water. You made me flood the neighbors. Why'd you do it, bitch? You wanted to get back at me. So I'm warning you that you'll be paying my neighbors for repairs. For ruined up appliances and furniture. Lisa stopped. It was interesting to listen to her husband's mistress, because for the sake of her well-being, Mason was ready to lose not only his family, but also his life's work. The business he was now clinging to so hard. What are you talking about? Mason was as calm as a tank, looking at Cindy brazenly and pretending that the lady was not all right. I wasn't playing with her head. You were seen. And I'll prove you flooded the neighbors on purpose. She was staring at Mason, pointing her index finger in front of his face and yelling in a way that made it hard to call an ambulance. Give me the keys to the apartment. She held out her hand, and I threw them away. Why do I need the keys to your apartment, by the way? Cindy, you need to go to accounting. Are you in arrears there? The deadline's long past, and you don't seem to be in much of a hurry to pay it back. Mason was well aware that Cindy had nothing on him. No one was going to look into the fact that she'd forgotten to turn on the faucets. The management company had put a notice on the door to warn tenants like her and her son. Let her say whatever she says now. She can't prove anything. And if she's going to write a report on him, she'll have to confess to the motive of his crime. Pity the neighbors, of course, but Mason couldn't think of anything cleverer. Well, he'll sell the apartment and settle up with everyone. He may not see his money, but he will feel satisfied that the reward has found its hero. Kozulina, you, Mason, I can't call you anything else. At your mercy, I flooded all the neighbors up to the second floor. I and the entire entryway turned off the lights because she could wiring. I'm not talking about people's drywall and ceilings. Wallpaper fell off. Laminate flooring blew off. The neighbor on the 4th floor is demanding to buy him a new kitchen set, and you've stooped to pestering me with your receipts. Mason leaned defiantly over the papers. He wasn't going to listen to this hysteria. What he was most worried about was that this situation could easily be turned against him by Lisa. She couldn't have left 5 minutes early. Cindy, excuse me? When did you have the flood? It seemed like just now. Cindy noticed that she and Mason were not alone in the study. She looked questioningly at Lisa, listening to her husband's disgruntled, mooing voice. It even seemed to Lisa that he was ready to send her to 3 funny letters to keep her out of it. The day before yesterday, I said incredulously, "At your husband's mercy, I flooded 3 apartments downstairs and 2 apartments next door. Thank God, the neighbors on the 2nd floor called the emergency service, and they shut off the water. They should have changed the locks a long time ago. I'm pretty sure he did it. There's no one else." Apparently, Cindy decided to find an ally in Lisa, unite and stomp on him so that the next time before, running into women. Mason first figured out how that might turn out for him. After a little thought, Lisa looked puzzled at Mason's disgruntled face and said something that gave him a chill. "I can't say anything specific, but I think Mason was at work all day the day before yesterday. Leave me your cell phone number, just in case. If I remember anything, I'll call you." Watching her husband, Lisa noticed that despite the crooked grin in his eyes were flashing with lightning, and his face was instantly pale. Mason was extremely cautious, trying to pretend that he knew nothing of the incident, but it was not difficult for Lisa to guess where he had traveled in his work uniform, and for what purpose he had taken the suitcase of keys. Writing down Cindy's phone number, Lisa left the office. After calming Molly down. Not to worry, she sat down at her desk. She wanted to shut off her thoughts, but she couldn't. In front of her eyes stood this sweet couple, thanks to which her life had been cracking at the seams for a long time. Lisa had no complaints about Cindy, but about Mason, who, according to her own beliefs, had become so naked and rotten that he had stooped to this kind of nastiness. The claims were many. Thinking about her blighted family life, Lisa only wondered and couldn't understand how she could have missed the worm that had eaten away at her insides, leaving only a beautiful shell. Thank you, Kelly. God bless her. If it wasn't for her, I would still be living with my husband, looking in his mouth and not noticing anything around.
Lisa stared at the monitor, but her thoughts were focused on taking advantage of the situation. There is a system of video cameras in the city. They're recording video 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you wanted to, you could easily track a car. If you wanted to. In the hallway, there was noise again, shouting, accusations against Mason. Cindy didn't skimp on the profanity, screaming in a way that seemed to make the walls shake. Employees peered out of their offices
to look at the silence breaker. Making sure that Cindy had already left, Lisa wanted to get up and go to Massorn's office. Immediately from the doorstep, she pounced with accusations. But then she decided to take her time.
I had to weigh everything, think it over. But Mason, as if reading her mind, came into the office himself. I hope he didn't take what she said seriously. Cindy must be getting really paranoid. He said irritably as
he watched Molly gather up the invoices to leave the office and let them talk in peace. I didn't expect her to be so jumpy. Why did she come here, probing the ground, scanning Lisa's face and trying her best to hide her tension?
Tell me you had nothing to do with it. I was surprised to see you the day before yesterday in your work clothes. You had your car repaired, and you drove around in someone else's car. Well done, you've thought of everything, I said in a steady voice, watching his reaction without any emotion. But Mason didn't even raise an eyebrow. His restraint was enviable. Let's not have you pretending to be a private detective. I had nothing to do with the flood in Cindy's apartment. There's a reason they say it's one step from love to hate. When you were paying off her rent, you were so sweet. You were telling everyone that you were going to the Maldives on vacation. Did you look at her so much that you were ready to eat her? Lisa snickered. Mason looked at her resentfully, as if she were talking nonsense that was impossible to listen to. He grinned. You've got a lot to talk about. You should have thought about yourself, analyzed your actions a little more, and been a little more cooperative. You should listen to what your husband says. All men make mistakes, but smart women don't rush to file for divorce. So you suggest that I turn a blind eye to your behavior, take the divorce petition, pretend that I live very well in a one-room apartment, and praise you for giving our savings to an unknown person. Did I understand you correctly? Lisa looked at Mason with a grin. The thought flashed through her mind that when a man has no conscience and soul ache for his despicable deed, it is safe to say that he has neither. Wise wives do just that. And then they live soul to soul till their old age. You see, I don't want Cindy. Mason shrugged his shoulders indifferently. So you should be glad to get rid of your foolish wife and find yourself a wise one. Mason, again, in the face. And on, she went on. You've come to probe the ground. You think you're the smartest, but you'll never make it. Now I have a very valuable witness. Judging by Cindy's mood, she'll do anything to drown you in her own shit. And I can give her some valuable information for it, because I'm absolutely sure that it was you who caused the flood, and for the sake of your ego, you didn't even spare the neighbors. So, my dear, in order to keep my mouth shut, you'll have to sell your share in our business. I don't want 10 or 20%. I want to sleep well, and the only way I'll sleep well is when you're not here. Mason was stunned by her words. Igni realized that he had lost to Lisa the moment Cindy came into the office. I wondered why she'd come. Was she hoping he'd confess everything and hand it to her on a silver platter? Yes, after the way she'd behaved, Mason would do anything to hurt her and make her suffer. Let her be glad she'd gotten off scot-free. Despite his nervous tension, a malicious smile appeared on his face. If you think I'm afraid of you, you're wrong. I'm not afraid of anyone, and I haven't done anything illegal. I was at the car service. I have tons of witnesses. And if you decided to blackmail me to buy my business, I repeat, you have no chance. Lisa got up from the table, picked up her cell phone. Okay, I'll call Cindy on your behalf and set up a meeting. I'll tell you everything I know in detail. I'll lay out my assumptions. And then you can figure out who's right and who's wrong. I suggest you hire a private investigator. There's a lot of security cameras in the city. Maybe they can track you in someone else's car. And what took you so long to get to work? You think you need this, and you can rest assured that I will. Lisa started dialing Cindy's phone number. If he thought she wouldn't do it, he was wrong. She may not achieve anything, but she will show him that women should not be offended. Because if you make them angry, they can be very sneaky. Mason, think about it. You have nothing to lose. I'm not going to work with you. Anyway, if you go through with it, you'll really have to sell the firm to a third party. But before I do that, I'd get all your nerves and Cindy would help me. I don't even doubt that. I'm going to count to 3. 2. Another second, and she was ready to press the green tube. I'm in. His face went white as a sheet. But Lisa wasn't going to feel sorry for him, much less back down. All that remained was to negotiate the amount, to take out a loan. Exactly 1 week after the divorce, which did take place. They met in the notary's office to certify the purchase agreement for the sale of the Mason share. After signing and wishing Lisa good luck, Mason was the first to leave the office, started the car, and, not to see the satisfied face of her lawyer, whom he hated with every fiber of his being, drove away. Lisa was on her way to her office. The epic sale of the firm was finally over. Mason had almost moved his things out. She had deliberately delayed, hoping not to see him again. But Mason must have thought otherwise. He popped out to pick up another girl, decided to say goodbye to the staff. It was funny watching the ex-husband. With a businesslike look, he walked around the offices and, as if in the old memory, handed out instructions. And you still cannot calm down? Didn't prove me enough. I decided to make a test to finally finish, he said with a smile. If you must know, I'm happy for you. You're doing great. Too bad I realized it too late. If I had known you were so determined, I would never have cheated on you. Lisa looked at her ex-husband and couldn't understand how she could have lived with him for so many years. Now she only wanted him to leave and never come back here again. As they say, out of sight, out of mind. Everything he has now is his own merit. Let him be happy that she did with him fairly and did not underestimate the value of his share. The only thing she really wanted was for Mason to not forget about her daughter. It was a shame that lately he hadn't even remembered Miranda. That unscrupulous man was only thinking about himself and how he was going to live his life. Thank you. I'm happy for me too. As Lisa entered the office, with a sigh of relief, she sank down on the director's chair, opened the safe, put the folder with documents. Seeing the Mason car pull away from the office through the window, she smiled and went about her direct duties. 3 years passed. For her daughter's birthday, Lisa ordered a separate hall for children's parties. Molly and her son also came to the entertainment center. After that incident, when she didn't fear Mason and supported Lisa in court, they became friends. Lisa never had any complaints about Molly's work, and her paperwork was always in order. If Lisa needed to go anywhere, she always knew that Molly would not tolerate any financial irregularities. The children were entertained by the animators. They ran around the playground with the children shooting and jumping on the trampoline. The little ones were delighted. Parents could relax a little at this time. Lisa bought a new pantsuit for the party. It was the same color as the birthday girl's dress. Hi, I haven't seen you in a long time. You look great. I heard her ex-husband's familiar voice. Miranda invited Grandma and Dad. Lisa, of course, wasn't thrilled with the idea, but she didn't object and, gritting her teeth, agreed. To Mason's credit, he paid child support faithfully. Sometimes he took Miranda away for the weekend. She'd come home. She's always in a good mood and always with an expensive toy. About 6 months after the divorce, Mason finally remembered he had a daughter. For a while, he only called. Then he started taking Miranda on weekend vacations. Took her to entertainment centers, to the park. In the winter, they'd go ice skating together. Not to me, Lisa replied, kissing her mother-in-law on the cheek. Lisa looked closely at her ex. She thought he was hustling. He didn't have that former glamour. Now in front of her stood a man with faded eyes, a strained smile, with bags under his eyes that added a few years to his age. Despite the loud parting, her mother-in-law kept calling. Sometimes she came to visit and often complained about the absent-minded son, who lives in the past and does not intend to marry. With the money Mason received after the sale of the firm, he bought a one-room apartment in an old building, renovated it, put the rest into an account. He's out of the business. Got a job as a manager at a supermarket. His only outlet was his daughter. When asked about marriage, he says he's fine on his own. Again, according to her mother-in-law, Lisa knew that Mason had been at war with Cindy for a long time. She never gave him his money back. Her relationship with her neighbors had soured after the flood. She had to sell her new apartment and pay people back, though. Almost all the money was used to pay off debts. Together with their son and ex-husband, they moved back into a one-bedroom apartment. Ethan was a little late for the party. He came into the hall with 2 bouquets. He gave one to the birthday girl and the other to Lisa. "How beautiful," my wife said, and kissed her on the cheek. Lisa looked at her favorite man with embarrassment. She still couldn't get used to the fact that Ethan was constantly admiring and complimenting her without any shyness. Lisa had been looking at him for a long time, After her husband's betrayal, it was hard to believe that anyone could really love her. There were many doubts. She was especially worried about her daughter, but all doubts were in vain. Ethan was always there for Miranda, never raised his voice at her, and if she was wrong, he always found arguments to justify her actions. The proposal to marry him sounded a year and a half after the divorce, and another 9 months later, Nikita was born. He was not taken to the entertainment center and left at home with his grandmother. In a 3-room apartment, which was bought immediately after the wedding,